We're back at part 3, or to part 3 now. So we have our rope. It can reach down the hole. We've tied one end of the rope to a tree, probably. We've used a clove hitch. I'm sorry, a coil and a clove hitch to fasten it to that tree. Now there are better, more secure hitches that we could have chosen to use, but the coil and the clove hitch is just easiest and most simple, and it's secure enough. And you probably might want to add more clove hitches, I'm sure, if it was an emergency, but if you don't know knots at all, you know, the coil and the clove hitch is very simple, and people kind of instinctively tie something. They don't usually do the coil, but they'll do the half hitches, so they'll get half of it. So now everything is tied, the rope's tied. Now we're going to go to now we're going to work on the rope that we're going to lower to our friend. Now that rope we're going to lower to our friend, it'd be good if we made some kind of a loop out of it that he could put his body into. That way he himself can grab the rope, but then the rope's also grabbing him. But you don't want a loop that's going to slip and get tighter on him as he's pulled up or as he climbs up. We want something that's not going to slip, that's going to be a loop that, you know, stays the same no matter how much you pull on it. And those are called loops. As opposed to a loop that moves, that's called a snare. So there are better loops to use than the one we're going to go into, but this is the most simple, and it'll probably work in that situation for sure. Well, I would say probably. It will work. It could, what do they call it when they come undone? I guess it could come undone, could loosen. And it's not the ideal. It's not what rescue teams rescuing people in the mountains or from helicopters and stuff use, but you know, it's good enough for the practical 8-knot method. And that is the bow line loop, the bow line. I just call it the bow line. Okay, and this is we've already talked about how we did this. The story is got a hole and a snake, right? So you make a hole in a snake. The snake goes up the hole, around the tree, and back down the hole. Now this is different from they say a rabbit or whatever, but whatever. One thing about the bow line, you want this working end to be inside of the loop on the inside. It can come out on this outside if you do it incorrectly. This is just better, so it makes it less likely to loosen. That's what I was told. So I haven't actually done experiments to try that, but I believe the information. Okay, so now in our story we have the rope, we've got a loop. I'm sorry, I do it chronologically here. We have a rope, it's tied together, two pieces of rope tied together, it reaches our friend. It's tied to a tree, and we have a loop at the end of it, and our friend, you know, we can now rescue him. Okay, so that's the end of that story. But we have, you know, more knots, of course. But those are your three main knots. You got your bends, you got your hitches, and you got loops. So very simple, and they're very useful. But there's other knots that are also sweet, and they're actually more useful knots. Well, I'm not gonna. There are knots. I think I'll say when I say it that this knot is like, you know, one of the most knots I use. Knots I use most often. Okay, so we have we've gone through them all, the bend with the hitch and the loop. Not through them all. Getting some verbal diarrhea going on here. And so the next category of knot is a loop in the line. So that's if a loop, well, I've already, you know, loop in the line. So it's kind of the idea is, let's say these two ends of the rope are extremely long, and we just can't use this in to make a loop, and plus, well, that's more detail I want to get into. So this is not a very useful knot. You know, we call it the practical 8-knot method, and it kind of this violates. I mean, these knots aren't like in the most practical setup, because there's, you know, other knots that I could be going into, and this one's not going to be used hardly at all. But in order for me to memorize these 46 knots, I have to have some kind of system, and the system is I have bends, I have hitches, and I have loops. I have 4 of those, each of those. And of course I have more knots than that. This is really going to be an interesting video because, well, actually not interesting. It's going to be kind of boring. It's going to be hard for you to get through. It's kind of late in the night, and I really don't think I want to do a part or a retake on all this, so I'm probably just going to use this. So you're just going to have to suffer through it. It's a little treat for you. So I have these category knots, and I probably should have stated this first, but we have, yeah, I'm almost sure I should have stated this first. Again, we have bends, hitches, loops. You have loops and lines. You have snares. You have grips, which is a name that I've come up with. A grip is what's commonly called a slip. Oh no, so what do they call it? Movable knot, or a grip and slip and grip. I think it's what it's called. You have, I have another category, specialty hitches, and yeah, I'm rethinking right now at this moment of ditching all these parts and starting over. Because this is going to be like a nightmare for someone to use, because I think the detail is good, and I think the going off topic is, you know, fair. I get to impart some opinions of mine onto you, and I don't know. We'll just keep rolling and see what happens. But I can definitely see how this would be totally impractical for a lot of people. To have to go through hours of footage to just basically get the idea of, hey, you need to put your knots in categories, organize them. I don't know, it's kind of hard for me even to go into without going into all of it. Excuse me. So I think we were at, what, 6 or 7? We have specialty hitches, and then I have the miscellaneous knots. I have structure knots, which are knots that make structures, of course, or at least aid in making structures. Then I have the maintenance, and then I have 2 fishing knots. So we have these loops and lines. Now the best loop and line is called the snake up hand loop, and it's called the Alpine Butterfly loop. Which Alpine Butterfly, I mean, that's pretty and everything, but it doesn't really help. The name is kind of just a waste. Snake up hand is you have a hand, and the snake is gonna go up your hand here, and then here, and then it's gonna come down your hand like that, and you'll end up with that. And you take this top loop, so you got 2 loops here. You got this one, and you put it through here, and then you get your loop and line, which would be good for if you're at a campsite and you want to just somehow have these little loops to hang something. I'm not sure what you would hang, but if you needed to. It's not super practical, but it's the best of the loop and line knots, and that's why we're showing it here. I could probably change the name practical knots, because practicals could just say, you know, or overall, I don't know. I'd have to think of like overall practical knot. I don't know. It'd be kind of a long deal. Okay, so our next category of knot is snares, the loop that moves. Okay, and this is actually the knot that I can't tell you about. So we're moving on. If you've survived this far on a video, if you do want to learn this knot, I guess the best way would be just to send me a comment. We'll hang out and talk. Actually, I'm not even sure. It's just like people are so busy. It's kind of hard. It would take me to have, if it's someone online I didn't meet ever. I don't know. It'd take me a while for me to say, because I'd like to share the knot. It's not like I'm trying to not share it or whatever, but it's powerful, and I don't give that information out to just anybody. So if you're interested, just write me a comment and we'll converse. And if I think you're suitable for it, then we'll show you it. Anyways, so we're skipping that one. Now we're moving on to the grips. Now, I like the word grip because that's what they do. The knot grips. I mean, it moves, but it grips, Slip and grip, I kind of think that's a long name. I'm not going to get into that in too much detail. So this one is kind of a tricky one because the most common way of doing it isn't the best way of doing it. The best way of doing it is called a midshipman's hitch. The more common way, I think it's a midshipman's hitch, but it's done in a different variation, and that's what they teach in the Boy Scouts, and it's real common, but it's not as secure. So this is the midshipman's hitch. Working in here, you go over here, and the critical part here, you go here. I'm not even sure this video is it's just so hard to show knots. I'm not even sure the proper format for this video. Anyways, it's a midshipman's hitch, and you have to dress it up a little bit for it to start working. What in the world? Something didn't look right. I'll try it again. Just trying to make it learnable to you, and then I somehow didn't do it right. Now, what's kind of interesting about the midshipman's hitch that Grog talks about is that this is a really good loop to make. I think the story he has on there is pretty interesting about how if you fall off a ship, I think he said there'd be a guideline or there'd be some kind of rope in the water for someone who did happen to fall off the ship, and you could grab that rope, and of course it'd be this way. And you'd have to go to a site, but it's really interesting how the rope is going, and this particular knot, from what I'm hearing, is on that guy's website, is the knot that they chose to use to tie around their bodies, because you could tie with the load on here, and you could make a loop and fasten around your body without having to do the loop first and then slip into the loop. You could actually tie it with a load on there. But that's the best one. It's really secure. That's what I recommend for the grip. So there's a fake version. The fake version's easier. I don't know. They're all the same. As far as easy, I don't know. Okay, anyways. So, that was the grip. Next, we're going to move to specialty hitches. And there's just so many hitches that I had to make a separate category for it. And one of the methods I have is I know how many knots go into each group. The first three categories, the bends, the hitches, and the loops, since those I have 4, there's a rescue knot for each one of those. Everything else, there's only 3 in these categories. I have 3 snares, I have 3 looping lines, 3 snares, 3 grips, 3 specialty hitches. I think what I'll do is I'll make 2 different versions. I'll do like one short version. I'll do this version, and then I'll do videos. And then I'll do one short version where it's real nice and refined. And I just give you kind of what I just gave you now, the details. And we'll do it that way. That sounds like it'll work. I can't believe, YouTube, they have these huge, I can't believe they store all these videos, how much just, they store it for free, These huge servers, and they're just like, oh yeah, we'll store your stuff. It's like, how much does this cost, and who's paying your bill, and how does this work? So that's one of the strategies, is having a certain amount of, I know that there's 3 knots of each of these categories. Now, I have more hitches than just these 3 specialty hitches, but these specialty hitches category, these are like the best of the hitches, of the ones that were left over after the first category of hitch. So that's kind of a way to help you memorize all these knots. So we're at specialty hitches, and specialty hitch for the practical knot method is the power cinch hitch. That's commonly more called the trucker's hitch. I like power cinch because that describes really the main benefit of the hitch itself, is to cinch things down. However, I've noticed on this paracord 550, I guess that's all they make. I've never heard of anything else other than paracord 550. This paracord 550, when I was setting up a backstop for my slinging, I was really cranking down on this stuff, and it tore, just with one crank, it would tear through half of this stuff. So this plastic, it cannot do with rubbing against itself. The power cinch hitch actually just destroys it. I don't think regular rope it would destroy it, but with this paracord it does destroy it. And I basically went and did well, this is actually another good little nugget here. I actually feel that just pulling on a rope, it's hard to just describe. Okay, let's say you're, with power cinch hitch, you're going to go over here and do stuff. I think you get a tighter rope if you pull, let's say my hand over here is your whole body, your person, right? You just pull, and then just come and cut it off like that. I think you get a tighter rope than you do with even the power cinch hitch, in my opinion. But again, that was with the paracord, and I had to do it that way because I got tired of destroying the cord. But power cinch hitch, see, maybe I don't even need to show the knot, because it's kind of, why am I even showing it? It's like you're not learning it from me showing you. So yeah, maybe I don't even need to do that. Maybe I'll just like using the rope for important things like the hole in the tree and stuff like that. But am I going into all the detail? Let's see, 'cause if I'm not doing it, I might miss out on detail. Oh yeah, see, this is a perfect example. I just have to show it on film. So the way I teach this is, imagine this working in is a waterfall. So this rope is just water, it's a waterfall, and it's falling down your hand. So what you want to do is you want to make an S. You see the S? You want to make an S. And of course, you pinch the S together. You don't cross it, but you just, put them together like that. Make a little bite, a little loop there. A bite is whenever you just fold a piece of rope, if you don't know. A loop would be like that, but a bite would just be like that. So you have your waterfall, it's just flowing. And you make your S, okay? Now the S goes behind the waterfall. Do you see that? It goes behind the waterfall. Okay, and then you end up with this. Now the waterfall is stronger than the S. I mean, let's look at this piece here. This is that's doing that over there, right? The waterfall is stronger than the S. Just have to remember that. And so the waterfall goes through the S. So it goes, you move this piece, in other words, from over here, you move it. I'm sure you know this. See, that's kind of the hard part of making this video not too long, Because again, it's not designed for you to learn the knot, but at the same time I'm trying to teach you how I teach it. That's kind of the purpose of this video. So I say the waterfall goes, you straighten that over here, the waterfall is still going down. You want the waterfall, that's what they do, they go down. And the most common mistake here is people will take this loop, and the next step is, let me do it right first, go up and through here, okay? But the most common mistake, and the one I did for a long time, was just go straight over. And you can, and it works, but I think the optimal positioning here is you go up this hole, not down into it. And then you dress the knot. And the word dress, what that means is you're basically tightening the knot so it's not loose. You're forming the knot. So you end up with this, and this is actually a knot in itself, which is a loop and line. If you notice, it is a loop and it's in the middle of a line. This is called a directional figure eight. And we'll get into that when we do the next loop and line. This is actually my speedy loop and line knot. So that's what you end up with. Next, you get your rope, and I guess you could go go up and down. I'm not sure what the correct way of doing it, for there's even a right and a wrong way. I just go down into it, do it here, and then you have two options here. You can do a release knot, and here's a good example of another name here. People call this release knot typically a slip knot. Now a slip knot to me is like a noose. Something that slips is like a noose. This thing right here does not slip. When you pull on it, it'll undo, but it's not slipping. So I reject the name slip knot and I replace it with a release knot. You pull this thing and it will release this knot. So that's a release knot. So that's one option. And another option, and I'm not going to be able to demonstrate how this works and why you'd want to do it and stuff. I guess that's not the point of the film. That's not germane as a word you could use there. So, and then you have the you have the clove hitch option here. Let's see if we can get this straight. If you don't want the release knot, if it's going to be not worth using the release knot. And again, I'd go with the clove hitch over a cow hitch. I think the clove hitch is more secure. Okay, so that's our power cinch hitch. Moving on to the next category, miscellaneous knots. This has got to be one of my favorite knots. I use this knot for so many things. And it is called the, I use the original name because I really don't have any other name to call it. It's called the, give me a second, the buntline hitch. So it's also a hitch. So, why did it make it to the specialty hitch as well? It just didn't work out. I mean, I could put 4 hitches in there, but for my memory, it works out. There's a little, it just didn't, okay, so the buntline hitch, I like it a lot. I guess it's first used, or it's most common with sailors. I'm not getting into that. Okay, so the buntline hitch, what it basically is, it's like a suit tie knot. It's one of the knots you can use to tie your tie. Which I would never wear a tie. I would wear a clip-on because if anyone wanted to fight you, I know it seems completely paranoid or unrealistic, but if someone were to fight you and you're wearing a tie, that's a disadvantage to have a noose around your neck. And the buntline is a noose; it'll slip. And that's one of those off-topic comments. So the buntline hitch, I like it a lot. I use it a lot. I use it the most out of all my knots. And this is how you do it. And it's so simple too and nice. So again, we're going to say in the context of a hitch here, because it is a hitch. However, we'll go this way first, and we'll go into the however in a second if I remember. So we're going this way always, except for one hitch, the icicle hitch, which we'll get into, and that's a master hitch. Go this way, make a hole in a snake. In other words, you don't want to go underneath. Another way of saying it. And I don't see, I'm showing you, but at the same time, okay. And then it goes over. Kind of have to do it, and then see if there's any comments I need to post. State. And it's just a really nice knot. I use it a lot for securing things, and it's just a nice knot. It's simple. And okay, so that concludes all of the 8 practical knots minus 1 of the 8 practical knot methods. So those are really easy to remember. And those are the categories, and we'll keep doing these categories until we've gone through them 3 times. I'm sorry, it's kind of like we go through them twice, and then we're going to do a rescue knot series, a little mini series, and then we'll finish the 3rd one out. But we do 3, there's 3 categories, and that's like half the knots. There's 23 knots right there. And it's easy to remember because it's in a system. There's always the main general knots. There's 4 of them in each category. All the other ones, there's 3. I don't add any more to that because that keeps everything in my memory working well. Anything else gets added to miscellaneous or structures, and it's got to be a really good knot and for it to get in there. Anyways, that's a different comment. Okay, so now we're going to go to our speedy knot series, which are the same category of knots that we just went over. So our bend is going to be the square bend. And everyone knows that. Right, over, under. Oh, this is interesting. Just a little comment. The way I was taught it, the way to do it when I was young is like, oh yeah, you could do right over left, left over right. I don't know how my brain, I guess I'm just really literal, and it didn't really work for me. It's, maybe if someone said right over under left instead of right over left, they said right over and under left, and left over under right, I would have gotten it. So I would recommend, at least for me, it would have helped me, instead of saying right over left, left over right, saying right over under left, left over under right. And there's your square bend. Next is the hitch, speedy hitch here. Oh, I like this one a lot. I need to use it more often. I don't, but I like it a lot. This is called I call it the drawline hitch. It's called the timber hitch. Timber hitch didn't really do much for me. It's kind of a waste of a name. Drawline hitch, the reason why I choose that is because this is the hitch that they use on bow and arrows. And the idea between a draw line is you have something anchored and you have something drawing it. There's tension here. So that's the idea behind a draw line. If you're drawing something, you're pulling something. So this rope has pull on it. Timber doesn't illustrate that. So also they use the drawline hitch on guitar strings, classical guitar strings. I've got one right here. Let's try not to bump stuff. If it does, it's going to be a loud noise. Oh, there's a little bit. So you can see that's the drawline hitch. This one's a better one. This one didn't have as many fraps. But that's a drawline hitch. And again, these strings are under tension, so that's why that works. So, the drawline hitch, it's very nice if you just want to tie something up. You don't really care if it gets loose or if it comes loose. I use it a lot for my goat. Actually, I don't use it a lot. I need to start using it a lot. I always use the bunt line. And the bunt line, it's really interesting. These animals, I use it for a pet goat we have. And these animals can really get these knots tight. Like this buntline knot gets really tight with this animal. I don't know how they do it. You know, it's like I really get those knots tight, and he seems to always seize up the knot. I was about to explain why we tie him up because I was afraid of PETA, but I don't really need to explain to you why I tie up a goat. You know, PETA is a bunch of people who think that animals, well, I'm not, you know, you belong to PETA, whatever. But the stereotype, and I think a lot of it's true for the leadership, especially at PETA, they think animal lives are just as important or more important than human lives, and that's animal worship. That's what the pagans did. And I reject that. That's false. And so I'm not going to explain to you why I tie up a goat. So I use this bunt line to tie up this goat, and he really gets that bunt line tight where it seizes up and I have to spend like 2 minutes or a minute, you know, getting it undone. And if I just would remember to use this draw line hitch, it would be a whole lot easier. Plus I'd be able to tie him up faster. So we'll demonstrate the draw line hitch. So if I can remember, let's see here. Draw line hitch. Oh yeah. So again, we always go this way. Okay. And we make a hole in a snake. And what's kind of interesting is they call it a timber hitch. That's the common name for it. And that's what you don't make. We have a hole in a tree, right? We have a hole, and this is a tree. If you can see the rope underneath that other piece, the working in underneath the standing in. That's what we don't make. It would be nice if it was, because it would kind of work out with the timber hitch. We make the hole in the tree. And this is easy to get wrong, and this is what kind of makes this not dangerous. Well, they're not dangerous. It can be dangerous. People who work on trees, what are arborists, they use this, and if you don't get it right, it can be dangerous. This is why people probably don't use it very often, because it's kind of confusing. It's so simple, it's kind of confusing. But you make a hole in a snake, so just kind of remember, it's not the tree, it's the snake. It's the opposite. And then you go down and down in. Not down, I guess. I don't really have any verbiage. By the way, when I said with grammar here is the idea here of using a name. We use the name here, hole in a snake. That's grammar. Now, commonly people call grammar, you know, the syntax of syntax of a language. And that's true, but grammar can also be kind of like content, and that goes into something they taught in the Dark Ages, I guess. I wasn't there, but that's what I hear. Something called a trivium. And the trivium is pretty interesting because it's an interesting philosophy on learning that I think is correct. When you're teaching someone something, the first thing you teach them is grammar. And that's like the parts, the pieces, the names. Like if it's a language, you're going to teach them the alphabet and words and stuff. That's all grammar. And the next phase of teaching in this Dark Ages philosophy is called, what's it called? Grammar. I always forget the middle one. Grammar. Ooh, I might have to look it up because I don't want to. Well, maybe you'll go look it up yourself. But there's a middle one. Now I want to explain to you now, but this video's, I should have cut it off before. We will go in part, whatever, 3 or something, 4. No, it's going to be 4. Now.